Hey, this is Josh Patrick, and you're at Cracking the Cash Flow Code. And today, my guest is Melisa Leon, and Melisa is a fractional CFO. She's got a book that's just coming out, which I'm sure she's going to talk to us about. And I love fractional CFOs, and the reason is too many business owners, especially in the construction world, don't get good numbers, don't get good dashboards, don't have the information they need to run their business appropriately. So fractional CFOs are a wonderful thing for you to consider. And after today's podcast, you may want to give Melisa a call. We'll make sure you can know where to find her. So instead of me yammering on, let's bring Melisa on. We'll start the conversation. Hey, Melisa, how are you today?
Hi, I'm great. How are you? Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. So, why don't we start off by just giving our listeners a definition of what a fractional CFO is and what a fractional CFO does?
Yeah, sure. So, fractional CFO stands for fractional or part time chief financial officer. And typically, in a large organization or corporation, a chief financial officer would be the person who either prepares the financial statements or all of the accounting and finance team rolls up to them. They're the ones that are ultimately responsible. And we decided to build this business right at the beginning of the COVID pandemic because we saw so many small businesses who were not able to quickly report in for the relief programs that the government was providing. And so we went to help make small businesses able to clean up their books, understand their books, and be able to submit those payments. So, or those applications rather, for the relief programs, like the PPP loans, those types of things that the government issued. And we've just kept going. So we're almost through year number 3, and it's been an amazing ride thus far.
Cool. So, over those 3 years, Melissa, what's the biggest lesson that you've learned that you can pass on, or the biggest lesson that your clients have learned and that you've helped them with that has been a problem you see over and over and over again?
Balance sheet. It's like the simplest way I could put it. In the typical financial world, you have 3 main reports that a business owner should look at. The P&L, profit and loss statement, is the one that most people are familiar with. They talk about their profits or their losses. Statement of cash flow is another very important report that talks more about the cash flow of your business. But one that I have noticed through my 3 years in business is that business owners don't understand, don't review, and don't ask questions about their balance sheet. And if you don't know what a balance sheet is, we need to talk about that in more detail. But it is the sum of your assets, your liabilities, and your owner equity. And what I have found time after time after time is that a business owner was either doing their own bookkeeping or they had a inexpensive bookkeeper doing their work and their balance sheet was not being reconciled. And I'll tell you, if your balance sheet is not clean, your P&L will never be. And that's definitely been the biggest thing we've noticed over the last 3 years.
It's interesting. For me, the piece of information of those three that business owners never look at is a cash flow statement.
Definitely.
And in my opinion, it's probably the most important statement, especially if you have fluctuating inventories, receivables, or capital equipment you buy. And the reason it's so difficult is it just doesn't make any sense because a
Mm-hmm.
negative is a positive and a positive is a negative in different parts of it. And you're saying, well, gee, it's a negative. My receivables went down, but that creates cash, or went down, but that creates cash. I don't get that. Why does a negative create cash? So it takes me usually 6, 7, 8 hours to get an owner to understand that cash flow statement when we finally do it, if it's important for them. I feel like in the
I
wealth management world, it's not important. But if you're in the construction world, you better understand your cash flow statement because you could be profitable and run out of cash.
And that's exactly right. That's what I tell people too. Your profit and your cash flow are not the same thing. But I would argue still that if your balance sheet is not reconciled, mainly your cash accounts of your balance sheet are not reconciled, you'll never have a proper cash flow statement or a proper P&L. And the cash flow statement, at least from the small business owners that I work with, they tend to look at their bank account balance and assume that that's the money that they have. And that's the worst mistake you can make because you may have payroll coming next week, or property taxes are due, or you have a loan out on a truck that you need to pay for. And if you're not paying attention to what's coming in and what's going out in the future, you're going to spend money that you don't have, or not leverage money that you currently have today.
So, do you help your customers put together dashboards?
Yes, absolutely. And all of our clients are at different levels. So some of our clients are in the early stages of businesses, and I can't get them to focus on a dashboard just yet because they're still in the throes of opening, for example. I have other clients that are in the middle of their entrepreneur journey, and they really want to sink their teeth into dashboards now and really understand it. And then I have some that are far more mature and are even considering selling their business, and so they're really focused on their dashboards and their financial reports as they look to let go. So it's really fun to be able to see all ends of the spectrum.
What are the things that what a dashboard is just to let people know, is a collection of numbers that will let you know what's happening in your business at a glance. The way I like to do them, I like to do them on 13-week rolling dashboards, which means your last 13 weeks are showing up so you can see what trends are. Melissa, what kind of stuff do you put into a dashboard?
That's a good question. It really depends on the business type. So I work with a lot of different industries. I like to use restaurants as an example because I feel like everybody can relate to them as a consumer, and you can understand what type of dashboard items might be used in a restaurant. So for example, if you owned a restaurant, we might look at the number of customers that came in the door. We might look at the number of the amount of revenue for breakfast or for lunch or for dinner. Conversely, we might look at the number of children that showed up, or the number of people who were at the bar but didn't eat. So there's a number of different ways that any business can look at their own information, their own dashboard, but it really is industry specific. But I always like to use the restaurant, as I said. So if you wanted to drill into how much does it cost you to make a hamburger, do you want to look at the burger patties alone, or the bun, or the lettuce and the condiments? Now, what about the wrapper for the burger, or the napkin, or the silverware? So you can really get as deep or as basic as you want. And I think that's the cool part about dashboards, is that you can modify them depending upon where the business is today, the industry, and really what the owner's after trying to modify.
Yeah, so one thing that I've noticed with what you're talking about is all that information on the dashboard you just talked about historical. I tend to like seeing dashboards that are predictive. Now, I do always put how much cash on hand we have in the dashboard, which is historical, and I'll probably put accounts receivable, which again is what's happening today, but we can watch our receivables going up, our receivables going down. Same thing with payables, but the more important numbers for me are things like, again, this is for the construction industry. They would have a different dashboard, obviously, in a restaurant would, but a big thing for contractors who might be listening is, what's my backlog? Is my backlog growing? Is my backlog shrinking? If my backlog is growing, that's great until it gets too big. If my backlog is shrinking, I might want to get out there and kick my sales department in the rear end and say, hey, start selling something. And another thing that we do is we always track, what's our sales by week? Is our sales outstripping our ability to deliver? I actually have a client that happened with. Their salespeople, we got to be so good, they were selling 50% more than we could deliver in any particular week, and the backlog kept growing and growing and growing, and we finally had to add a couple of teams because of that. So it tells us, we're looking now 13 weeks, which is 3 months, what's going to happen in the future and what's important for us to be focusing on. This is one of my problems with the accounting industry, is that they always focus on what happened. Well, that's nice. It's great to know, but it sure doesn't help me running my business very much. Does that make sense?
I completely agree. Absolutely. And I couldn't agree more. I have always really tried to lean away from just looking at the past. We always want to look into the future a bit too. And it takes a little bit more energy, I believe, to look into the future. You have to polish off your crystal ball a bit and really put in some factors that will help you make those smart decisions, and then analyze it once it's passed so that you can modify your future projections based on the mistakes you made of your prior one. So I always like looking at this is what I think I'm going to do. This is what I actually did. And this is the mistakes that I made in my forecasting so that I can modify for the next model.
The good thing about what I just described is that none of that is forecasting. Those are just real numbers that exist, and we don't have to. I mean, most people I work with smaller businesses, they don't have the time to budget. They don't have the interest to budget. They never do it anyhow. And if they
True.
do it, it's so wrong, it's kind of a waste of time. So
Yep.
the reason we've developed these sorts of dashboards is it allows the owner to run the business on 3 months, looking out 3 months ahead, which is
Yep.
all they can handle anyhow as a rule.
Yeah. And I think it depends on the business, right? On the industry. Like you said, the construction industry may be very different. I like to, if I could go back to my restaurant analogy, if you're a restaurant that takes a lot of reservations, you already have estimated customer counts on the books. You can already do your labor staffing and estimate. But if you're more of a quick and casual type of restaurant, you probably don't take reservations. And therefore, you're going to be having to guess based on historical data or holidays coming up or days of the week and come up with modifications. So really depends on the level of data that your business has, how much are you pulling into the future automatically, and how much do you have to guess on?
Yeah, with restaurants, I would be more likely to be measuring efficiency measurements on my dashboard. In other words,
Mm-hmm.
how much does a server bring in? And I could put my different servers on and say, what's
Yep.
their ability to handle the amount of work they have? And if I have one server that does $1,200 a night and another server that does $700 a night, I might be wanting to say, gee, I wonder what's different between these two, and what can I teach my $700 server to get them up to $1,200 a night? Because again, that becomes a labor efficiency issue.
Yeah.
My first 20 years in business, I actually had a vending and food service company, and we had very extensive dashboards depending on the
Mm-hmm.
type of what division we were looking at. Like our vending route drivers would have one set of measurements, our mechanics would have a different set of measurements, our cafeterias had a different set of measurements, and our catering division had a different set of measurements again. But we, sort of jammed all this stuff, the top line stuff, on one piece of paper because I was lazy. And my experience is business owners won't read pages and pages of reports.
Yep.
So do you
Yeah, and
have
no one
any?
has the time for it. So
Oh,
they just skim it, right?
that's true. Well, this is especially true. One thing I find is, do you help people put together business plans?
Absolutely. And that's actually one of my favorite things to do. I can't say that many of my clients have actually wanted to put through a business plan. We always encourage them to. It tends to be something that I see in the more mature business owner. And I don't mean that the human is more mature. I guess I mean that the business is more mature. It's through its initial growth phase, probably in year 6 or 7 of its life cycle. And they're really wanting to dig their teeth into how to make it more successful. The first 5 years, often you're just trying to figure out what works and what will stick. Um, and now, because of everybody coming through the pandemic, I have found more of our businesses, even though they're mature in their life cycle, it's like they're brand new because COVID disrupted so much that now they're having to come back out again. So we've really been trying to help our business owners relook at any business plan that they ever had or help them build one for the first time. I of course, think that they're incredibly important, but getting everybody to agree with me is not always easy. I think business owners go into their own business because they love what they're doing, not because they want to read a report.
Oh, this is always. Yeah. So, Melissa, when you do a business plan, do you, how long do you make it?
How long do I make the business plan? Like number
Yeah,
of
I mean,
pages or
you're helping someone write a business plan. How many pages is it generally?
my sweet spot I would say is 3 to 5 pages. I want to keep it short and sweet enough that they're going to be able to keep some direct focus on it. I've had people bring me former business plans that were 10s, 20s pages long. I've had ones that show up that are 1 page. I like to have financial data. I like to have goals of the future, goals of today. Really look into what your lending products are currently, how you're leveraging your assets today, and really dig into some of the meat of that.
Yeah, I love the fact that you're doing a short business plan. You know, my first business plan I wrote, believe it or not, was 85 pages long.
I don't think I've seen one that long.
Well, that was back then. This was in 1978, which was a long time ago. And there was a product out there that took you step by step by writing a business plan. I went through every single
Mm-hmm.
step and it came out to be 85 pages. You know what happened?
What's that?
Nobody looked at it, including me.
Yeah, that seems like it should have like a drum, like for the butt of a joke, right?
Well,
Just
I kind of tell this story every once in a while when I do platform talks. You know, I went from 85 down to 50, down to 20, and nobody looked at it at 20.
mm-hmm.
And we finally got it down to 4 pages, and that's when people started paying attention to it, including
Yeah,
me.
I agree. I mean, especially today, we live in a world of TikTok and Reels, and people want information in 9 seconds or less. And, it's just exacerbating our already short attention span. And I think in the business world in particular, you have to sell that way. You also have to consume your data that way. We try very hard to keep our information short and sweet, bite sized, so to speak, so that you can really start to digest the full piece. I've never had a business owner come to me and feel like they learned everything they needed to learn in a 1 hour session. It takes months of trying to take those 1 hour sessions and get it all along. My ultimate goal for a business owner is financial literacy. I would love for any business owner that I'm working with to learn enough to not need me anymore so that they feel like they've become their own CFO. Most of the time they don't want to become their own CFO because they're not interested in the financial piece, but it isn't simple. And there's a lot of us that have gone to school for a very long time. I have 20 years in corporate finance experience. It doesn't happen with an online QuickBooks certification, like many like to believe that it does.
Yeah, so with your business owners who are thinking about leaving their business or looking to sell or transition their
Mm-hmm.
business, how often do you tell them or have to tell them that, you know, your plan for retirement is not going to get you where you want to go? Does that happen often with you?
No, it hasn't happened for me yet, but I could definitely see the conversation that needs to take place there. The two business owners that we have helped prepare their business for sale, and they haven't actually sold yet, are very young and are just excited entrepreneurs that want to build the next best thing. So they're in their mid 30s, they've built a business, they think it's great, they want to sell it and then go start another one. We do find a lot of, I would call them serial entrepreneurs who are excited to build a business and then they get through it, they start another one right away. Sometimes they have three going at the same time. It's another thing I think is incredibly fascinating about um, COVID and the way that it's changed our business environment in a time where technology is so incredibly easy to use. People have these side hustles, multiples of them, and it's turned everybody into an entrepreneur, which I love. And I can't wait to see what comes next of it.
Yeah, we deal with people who are essentially over 50 years old. That's our target market that we like to work with.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say that about 99% of the time, I have to have what I call a tough love conversation with them, which means they say, I want to sell my business. I say, great. What assets do you have? And they say, well, I have my business. I say, okay, that's nice. What else do you have? I have my
Mm-hmm.
business. And then we go through a process where we say, well, let's talk about what your business is really worth to you in cash flow when you stop working. And they find usually their business is worth about 20 to 50% of what they need for retirement. So then we have a whole bunch of other strategies that we have to bring in place. It might be doubling the size of the business. It might be taking that excess cash flow and pre-funding your retirement. But all those
Mm-hmm.
things are really important to look at well before you get there.
Yeah,
Now, if you do,
absolutely.
you know, and I really like this idea, this thing called side hustles.
Mhm.
When I was in my 30s, we used to call them new divisions.
Yeah, it seems like everybody has one these days, and or two or three of them. I like how much our technology and the downtime that everybody had for the last 2 years has shifted everything. I get into these conversations about where are all the employees, right? We have this great resignation that's happened in this country over the last 3 years, and I think there's a number of issues, but I think a lot of them have gone into business for themselves, and it'll be really interesting to see what the next 5 years bring from that space with entrepreneurs who are starting up.
Yeah, well, the real challenge for them is the toughest skill to learn is if they want to grow a business and not just be side hustles forever, they have to learn
Yeah,
how to delegate.
absolutely.
And it's the hardest
Absolutely.
skill to learn. It's the reason there are very few businesses in this country that do $5 million or more a year.
Hmm.
It's really interesting. There's 28 million businesses, and only 300,000 do more than $5 million a year in sales.
Yep.
So it's a real small group that builds real businesses. Now you can have a very, very successful business with 8, 9, 10 people and make a ton of money. Just don't think about selling it when it's time to leave, because you have a really hard time doing that.
Yeah, that's very true. And that's very good advice. I think some entrepreneurs think they're going into business to ultimately sell it, but you have to look at it from the very beginning of where you're going and say, is this something I'm doing to pay my bills for a while, or is this something I'm looking to build to sell eventually? Because there are two very different strategies as being an entrepreneur. My business is not being built to sell. It's my brain that we're selling, and my business partner's brain. We're not building a business to ever sell, but that's very different than somebody else who may be trying to build a business and sell it later.
Yeah, there's absolutely nothing wrong with what you're doing. In fact, it's a
Yep.
really good strategy. It's just that when you think about transitioning out of your business, and frankly, if
Yep.
you're running a business like you are, you're likely not have to transition until you're about 75, maybe 80 years old. And if
That's
you
right.
like doing it, you can continue doing it for a really long time.
That's
At the
right.
same time, you need to pre-fund that ability to stop working.
Yep.
And
And that's
that's
where
where the
things
fun
like
comes
SEP
in.
IRAs and all of those other things come into play so that small business owners can pre fund their retirement.
Yeah.
And it's funny you mentioned that. We've had that conversation in my own business over the last 12 months about pre funding our retirement. And those types of things are really important for small business owners to take advantage of and understand completely so that they can not only take the tax benefit, but be prepared for the future.
Well, it's not so much they don't need to understand. They need to find somebody they can work with, they can trust,
Mm,
who does understand. Like when I
yes.
teach when I teach financial advisors how to work with private business owners, and I do that a fair amount. I say, if you want to work with private business owners, you better become an expert at every single type of qualified retirement plan there is, from the
Hmm.
SEP IRA to a 401k to a profit sharing plan to what we call the granddaddy plan, which is a cash balance plan, which allows you to essentially put all the money you want into a retirement plan. But you have to have a very successful business to do that.
Hmm.
And you can have successful businesses with 10, 12, 13 people. Now, I coached a business that had 15 employees and was making $2.8 million a year in profits.
Hmm.
So they could do pretty much whatever they wanted, but they had to take that cash and fund it because the business is not especially saleable.
Yeah.
So, Melissa, unfortunately, we are out of time. And what you're doing is really cool stuff. And I hope some folks who are listening decide to get in contact with you. So, how would they go about doing that?
Our website is the easiest place. It's 2 Cents Consulting, and it's TWOSENSE. So kind of like making sense. 2centsconsulting.com. And we're on social media, all the regular places, but our website's definitely the best place.
Cool. And I've got two things I'd like you to do. And you've heard me say
Okay.
this about 9 million times for my first one, or actually 370 times, but we'll be accurate for a change. And that's, please go to wherever you're listening or watching this podcast And please give us an honest rating and review. And while you're at it, subscribe. We've been doing this for 7 years now. Every Monday morning at 6 a.m. out comes a new podcast episode. So I hope you decide to rate us and subscribe because I'd love to have you listen. And the second thing is I've been writing a newsletter for 40 years, and it's been weekly electronic for about the last 18 years. And every Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock, that goes out. And it's sort of things that will help you make your business better. And I rotate through the 5 areas of sustainability. And to get that, it's really easy. Again, also, you just go to www.sustainablebusiness.co/newsletter. Give us your first name and email address, and you're on the list. So this is Josh Patrick. We're with Melisa Leon. You're at Cracking the Cashflow Code. Thanks a lot for stopping by. I hope to see you back here really soon.